Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the February MTA Board meeting. Do we have any public speakers?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, row three. First speaker is Anthony Simon. Mr. Simon.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, board members. My name is Anthony Simon. I am the General Chairman of the Smart Transportation Organization on the Long Island Railroad, representing thousands of Long Island Railroad employees. Their dedication was certainly displayed during their January 23rd blizzard, why I am here to speak today. First, I would like to thank the Chairman and President Nowakowski, as well as other agency presidents, for recognizing the transportation workers who left their homes and their families to do so in a necessary storm that was truly an amazing emergency. Their priority was to run trains safely, keep our system running for as long as possible, and dig out and restore when it was time to do so. 30 inches of snow with drifts exceeding 3 feet in some locations, heavy compacted snow and ice piling on electrified third rail, buried signals and switches, as well as snow-covered platforms and stairways across the entire system. We have heard it before, but we need to understand the magnitude of it. While all of this was happening, most of us in this room were fortunate to be home, but not railroad workers. They sacrificed and did what was needed to get the trains moving again within 48 hours of an historic storm. I am proud to say that during these times, labor and management know how to roll up their sleeves and do what is necessary. What is absolutely frustrating are the Monday morning quarterbacks, the groups and individuals who want to criticize and second-guess the decisions that are being made during times that are difficult to predict and react to. Would it be acceptable to just shut down and say, see everyone Tuesday? I don't think that would be responsible or realistic. I am concerned that the complexity and operational challenges of the MTA system is beyond the grasp of some of the self-proclaimed experts of various groups representing various interests. The bottom line is that a unified front for transportation is needed to move on and learn in order to improve. Finger-pointing and blame games are irresponsible and unproductive. That, in fact, is what creates credibility concerns. While I am clearly an advocate for accurate communication during any service disruption, I feel as though these pressures are actually becoming a distraction. To demand real-time information to deliver while a system is buried and trains may still be stranded is actually detrimental to the recovery. Let the professionals do their jobs. This agency does not need to spend resources on outside contractors, consultants, or studies to learn how to do it better. One day of class for an outside contractor will never provide the same experience of a seasoned railroad worker who is knowledgeable of the challenges and dangers in our system. Their involvement may even put employees and customer safety at risk. Our represented workforce has always been there, so don't have any doubts now. The agency is already making changes and adjustments. It's about timing the storm while meeting realistic expectations. I am encouraged of all of this to unify and show support, to make improvements for the good of our riders. Let's recognize the fact that this most recent storm recovery was truly an amazing accomplishment, as recognized by true railroad professionals over the last week in multiple reports. President Nowakowski and his team have already shared some of the issues that need fixing involving fueling, snow fighting equipment, the need to continue work towards a centralized train control operation, and to improve on communications. We will work with him in achieving these goals. In closing, there is nobody better than the current MTA workforce to continue to battle through storms. January 23rd, while one of our worst, was not our first and will not be the last. We look forward to working together with the MTA, the agency, the chairman, Prendergast, and Pat Nowakowski and the agency presidents to improve as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Our second speaker is Jordan Welk. To be followed by Kate Canto. Mr. Welk.
Prendergast, Dr. H., members of the board. The 2nd Avenue subway is being built to last at least 100 years. For Phase 2, that means the year 2125 and beyond. Immediately after Superstorm Sandy, I took pictures showing the debris line in the chain link fence under the 96th Street FDR overpass. On the same walk, on the east side of 2nd Avenue and 97th Street, I saw the low earthen berm the subway project had built to prevent flooding of the open trenches. Subsequently, I expressed concern about planning for sea level for Phase 1, in particular the 96th Street entrance. Bill Goodrich met with me and explained how this was being handled. Following Sandy, FEMA came out with revised maps, and the height of the 96th Street entrance is now 4 feet above the FEMA line. It's important to know that the FEMA maps are based only on historic data. In effect, FEMA maps assume 0 increase in sea level. On 2nd Avenue, north of 96th Street, there are grates in the sidewalk for the subway which, to be at the level of the 96th Street entrance, would have to be raised 4 feet. Since this is not practical in the middle of a sidewalk, the plan is to use plastic sheeting, plywood, and sandbags. To me, this is a warning of problems to come. What I ask of the MTA, and what I hope the press, elected officials, and members of the public will demand, is that the plans for Phase 2 of the 2nd Avenue subway make explicit the assumptions being made about the change in sea level over the next 100-plus years. Then we could all look at the assumptions and see if they are reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Welk. Kate Canto is our final speaker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Kate Contino-Cowett, and I coordinate the NYPIRG Strap Hangers campaign. Last year, Mayor de Blasio nominated 2 respected voices from the New York City nonprofit community to serve this body. Yet several months later, and we're still seemingly no closer to confirming Veronica Vanderpool and David Jones. This is a disservice to the riding public and to this board. I urge you to join us in calling on our elected leaders to move quickly to confirm Veronica and David to this body. The riders and the city deserve full representation on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Contino. I apologize for mispronouncing your name. That concludes the public comment, Mr. Speaker. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Morello. The minutes of the January meeting have been distributed to all. Are there any, did I have a motion to approve? Second, any comments or questions regarding those minutes? All in favor? Aye. Committee on Finance, there are 4 action items this month. The first action item requests the board approve new forms of the International Swaps and Derivatives Association Master Agreements. The next action item requests board approval for the extension of owner-controlled insurance for East Side Access. The third action item is MRT2 escalator payments to Dutchess, Orange, and Rockland counties. And the last action item to be considered and recommended is the transfer of the 2015 TBTA operating surplus as described in the staff summary and resolution provided at both the Bridges and Tunnels and Finance Committee meetings. There are 6 procurement actions this month in the total amount of $154 million, and there are no non-competitive procurements. There are 6 competitive procurements totaling $154 million, and the committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
I wish to be recorded, Mr. Chairman, as recusing on the first NYCT competitive procurement.
So noted. Oh, so we need to make an action back here. Okay, so we need to take an action after the first 4 actions that I mentioned. So are there any comments or questions on those? Second, any comments or questions? So the vote on that. So the first 4 action items. All in favor? Aye. Okay. I talked about the competitive procurements, no non-competitive procurements. Now we need a motion on that and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. There are no ratifications. There are 4 real estate action items which are described on pages 58 through 87 of the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these action items, and I move them.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I have a comment on the real estate item relating to 341 through 347 Madison, the old headquarters. In the past couple days, I think the city has, upon further analysis, thinks there's some questions and issues we need to work through with you all, and I would like to ask that we can postpone that vote so we can work with you and work through all the issues there.
Bob, what's the urgency? Bob Fran? I think it is key we move forward because the finances that derive from this particular transaction go to our capital program. So we'll commit the resources necessary to be able to respond to those questions in as timely a manner as possible. But I do believe there's a sense of urgency that we need to have to get this done as quickly as possible and hopefully by the next board meeting. Any other board members have any comments or?
I would just indicate, Polly, do you think we'll be ready to do it at the next meeting?
I mean, look, I think the city's ready to commit that we will put the resources we need to work through some of the issues, but I think the issues are significant, and so, let's all commit. We understand the importance of this board issue, but I think some of the questions, that the city needs to have answered are going to be pretty key to this whole deal being the success that we want it to be.
Okay, then, if you think we can take 1 month and Bob thinks we can do 1 month, then that's fine with me.
Mr. Farrar?
In the interest of comedy, I certainly want to support putting it on the table for a month, but underscore that this is absolutely key to the strength of our capital program going forward. So the extent to which we have a credible capital program and we can cause the funds to be available for our portion of it relies on this transaction. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd support the layover for a month, but expect that we'll be voting on this next month.
It's a reasonable request, and I think we should definitely honor it. I want to put this in a historic perspective a little bit, because this, to me, was the culmination of something that we started back around the time we were talking about Hudson Yards. And MTA was criticized for having more property than we were using effectively. So this was part of a big right-sizing effort that would allow us to monetize our property and brought about our move here. So it's a reasonable request. I think we need to work through it, but I don't want to lose the perspective of how long it has taken us to get to the point of being able to really monetize the property.
Mr. Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm fine with delaying it for a month, but one of the things I would request is, and other board members can speak for themselves, I'd like to know what the outstanding issues are right up front, because I don't want to show up here a month from now and hear that there's many unresolved issues and be put in an awkward situation of either ignoring those issues and taking a vote. So I think it would be helpful to know what those issues are that the city has concerns about so that we can monitor and follow it with MTA staff. And I believe that if everybody's committed to resolving these issues, you can easily resolve it within the next 30 days so we can vote on it next meeting.
We will share that information and we'll figure out what's the best way to get that information to you so that either we just vote on it but clearly vote on it and we understand what the issues are. Mr. Capelli?
Yeah, I concur with, or I agree with Commissioner Trottenberg's request, and I also agree with Larry Schwartz's suggestions, and would like to be kept informed as to the progress before we show up next month.
We'll figure out the best way to do that. I'm sorry, Polly.
I think I'm happy to sort of, put one of the issues that's arisen. I think there is a question we need to work through, and I'm not saying that we can't, about whether the MTA can just transfer its tax-exempt status to a private company for a 99-year period, whether that can work.
We outline all the issues that are being discussed and their degree of resolution, and hopefully we'll resolve it and bring it forward for action next month. That's the intent. Did you have a question?
No,
comment, I'm
everybody
sorry.
said it's reasonable. It appears reasonable. And everybody goes one month, no month, next month. It has been a long time, and we could have discussed this at any point along food chain here, the timeline here. But it's not free. Time is money. And you give up a month, you've given up 8% of the value for a year. That has a value too. And, you know, we have to have everything addressed, and you don't want to vote on it. Maybe there's issues we had not considered. They did talk about the tax transfer a long time ago, but I'm not sure that where the controversy arose, but leverage changes within a month. So now we'll be more critical. Maybe it is an important issue. Well, next month it's going to be harder to vote on it. It's not a free month.
Any way we can discuss this before the meeting?
We'll figure out what's the best way for us to be able to do so, and do so with the open meetings law. So we need to be able to do that so the board can make an informed decision. And some of the discussion may need to be at the board meeting. Seriously, that's what the board meeting's for, or finance committee. Mr. Merdler?
Mr. Page, are we clear that the proposed lessees are going to stay in place for that extra month?
I think we have, every confidence that they will. I can't assure you that we have not had direct discussions with them on that issue.
This has been part of a long process over many months, measured in years, I would say. So, no, it's a good point. I mean, there's a sense of urgency that a number of the board members communicated. That's what I heard. There was a sense of trying to accommodate the requests made by Board Member Trottenberg. I heard that as well. But we do need to move on with this because it is a significant amount of money for the capital program, over some $400 million. So we will advance it. I'll make a commitment to figure out what's the appropriate way to share that information with you and bring it forward for a discussion and board action, hopefully next month. Thank you very much. So we will table that, but with the exception of that.
Need a motion, Mr. Chairman, to table that?
Yeah, we do need a motion to table that.
Second.
Any further comment or question? All in favor of tabling it?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pelley and Mr. Ferraro. So with the exception of that item being tabled, we now have up for vote. It's been moved and seconded and discussed, all the other procurement actions. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Includes the Finance Committee. We now have a report from Transit Committee from Mr. Ferrer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Transit and Bus Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There is one action item for MTA Capital Construction on the agenda for board approval. The action item approves the agreements to accelerate the work on 4 2nd Avenue subway contracts as described in the staff summary on pages 88 and 89 of the board book. The committee recommends this action, and I move it.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are 10 procurement actions this month in the total amount of $232.2 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 6 competitive procurements in the total amount of $223.4 million for New York City Transit described on pages 90 through 102 of the board book. The committee recommends these procurements, and on their behalf, I move them with the exception of my personal recusal on item 1 of the competitive procurements.
Seconded. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. There are 4 ratifications described on page 102 through 108 of the board book. 1 ratification is for New York City Transit in the amount of $3.2 million. And 3 ratifications are for MTA Capital Construction in a total amount of $5.6 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. And that concludes the Transit and Bus Committee report.
The Metro North and Long Island Railroad Committees met jointly this month, and the report will be brought forward by Mr. Sidor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Metro North Committee and the Long Island Committee met jointly this month and report the following. There are 2 action items this month. The first action item is for the MTA Capital Construction and approves the agreement with 415 Madison Avenue LLC for reimbursement of construction services for utility relocation work in the amount of $15 million. The second item for approval is a Metro North to enter into a second memorandum of understanding with the City of Newburgh for reimbursement of ferry landing parking lease through January 31st, 2000 in 2017. The committee recommends these actions, and I move them.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are 8 procurement actions in a total amount of $7.2 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 8 competitive procurements, 1 RFP for the Long Island Railroad, 6 for Metro North Railroad totaling $4.6 million, and 1 for the MTA Capital Construction for $2.6 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
There are no ratification, and this concludes the report of the Metro North and Long Island Railroad Committees.
Thank you, Mr. Sador. The Committee on Bridges and Tunnels, Mr. Alan Capelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bridges and Tunnels Committee met this month to report the following. There are 4 procurement actions this month in the amount of $27.627 million. There is 1 non-competitive procurement for $22.9 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There are 3 competitive procurements in the amount of $4.727 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
There are no ratifications, and this concludes Bridges and Tunnels Committee report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I believe that concludes the business of the MTA Board meeting for the month of February. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody.
I like that.
Good morning, Dana.
Tom, how much does the sale of those buildings to Boston Properties stand to garner the MTA for its capital plan?
The staff summary speaks for itself, but I believe in excess of $400 million.
And why should Boston Properties get 99 years of tax exemption?
They don't. They would pay pilot payments in lieu of taxes. So it's a very, very, in some ways, complicated transaction, but it's used by a number of different people. But the revenues that we would get from it would go toward public good in terms of investment in the transit system. So in many cases, and really I defer to others, I go to a certain point and then stop, either they pay taxes or they make payments in lieu of taxes, and then it goes to an entity that then invests those money for the public good.
Tom, on the 2nd Avenue subway, which is scheduled to open in 10 months, how realistic today is that deadline, and have you considered pushing it back to prepare the neighborhood, the city, and others for the possibility that it's not going to open in 2016?
It's realistic. It's very realistic. It's also essential that we focus on that date for a number of reasons, not just the least of which is we've committed to that date. Right now, we've seen record ridership, as many of you experience when you ride the system, and probably no more pronounced than on the Lexington Avenue line. And how many times have you heard me say it? It's the most traveled line in the country. So anything we can do to offload the surging ridership on the Lexington Avenue line, and the first phase of 2nd Avenue will certainly do that, the sooner we can do that, the better. So there's a laser focus and considerable pressure paid on internal efforts and external efforts through contractors to get that done on time. And that was why you saw us also go forward with some contract changes to be able to expedite and make sure that.
But does there come a point this year where you have a clearer sense that it's not just a goal, but that it's truly achievable?
I believe it's achievable right now, but you're constantly measuring your progress against milestones and how well you're progressing. But that focus is going to be there, and right now we're confident we're going to make that date. Alfonso? Morning.
I understand. Is this on? I think so. Yeah. There's some progress in the LIR's long-term plan to electrify the Port Jefferson branch and build a yard out there. I know this is something the railroads want to do from when you were president and even further back from that. Can you talk a bit about what some of the benefits of electrifying Port Jeff and building a yard over there might be?
There's been discussion, but there's nothing in the plan about electrifying the Port Jefferson branch. There's a need to site a yard somewhere in Long Island to be able to accommodate the increased fleet size once East Side Access gets built. But there's been no real formal discussions on electrifying the Port Jefferson branch. It's been discussed since back in the days when I was president, 1994 to 2000 and before.
Putting aside how much discussions there have been, if you could do it, why would you do it? What are the benefits of doing it?
Very long, complicated issue, but I'll try to summarize it for you pretty simply. Electric service is more reliable, and it provides some benefits in terms of accoutrements versus diesel service. Right now, a number of people who ride the diesel service transfer at some point further west, whether it's at Huntington or Jamaica. There's only a finite number of trains, I think 2 or 3, that are dual-mode locomotives bringing you all the way into Penn Station. So those are examples. But for this very same reason, when we electrified out to Ronkonkoma, we had an increase in ridership because of the reliability of the service. Those are some of the benefits.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom. I am hiding. Just sort of a two-part question. That $400 million from the headquarters, is that over the lifetime of the lease or a year?
I believe it's usable for this capital program, but there's more monies over the lifetime of the lease. But I'll defer to Bob Ferrand to answer that question, and we can provide that to you.
And why the sense of urgency over this money for the capital plan? And are you pushing behind the scenes to get the 5-year plan to the program review board? Wouldn't that be the bigger...
We're pushing behind the scenes to answer all the questions we need to have answered to be ready to submit to the capital program review board. We want to make sure there's no outstanding issues that would put them in a position feeling they would have to veto it, because any one party can veto it. But any money that we have that we can bring forward, I mean, the pay-as-you-go capital, for example, that we can bring forward once we get an approved program, enables us to keep the program moving forward. So it's essential that we move on both those tracks. And this is an action item that if we work together and resolve with the city, we'll be able to get those finances, and they're critical. $400 million is $400 million.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, the mayor has proposed a trolley, and without the involvement, at least as far as we know, of the MTA. Do you think he can succeed at that? Would you like to be involved with it? What about transfers?
Well, first of all, there's a proposal out there to build a light rail between Brooklyn and Queens. I've seen the proposal. You've seen the proposal. The details of the proposal haven't been worked out in terms of exact routing and what streets. And it'd be premature to comment with any kind of specificity regarding, its utility on a transportation standpoint and transfers of that nature until you see it at that level of detail. And we have not seen it in that level of detail as yet.
I'm thinking about maybe moving to Williamsburg, so should I?
When? When?
No, maybe in 2017.
And with the Canarsie tube would be, no.
Yeah, so, tell me. I mean, we need to know.
Well, where we're at is it's no secret. I'll just go through I'll rewind and go fast forward. Immediately after Sandy, we had 8 of the 14 River tubes flooded. Probably the most damaging one was Canarsie. God bless you. We did Montague first with a full closure. We're doing Cranberry and Rutgers right now. Then we're going to do Clark Street. And the last one we're going to do is Canarsie, because it's not only impactful in terms of the scope of work we have to do in the tunnel, but the fact that there are very limited options for people to utilize in the event that that tunnel is out of service. Montague had quite a few different options. Cranberry and Rutgers, we actually didn't do a full closure. So we knew we were going to focus on that last. And so it's out there. I think it's like late 18, 19 before we actually do this. But we need to commit that money, because we're running up on 4 years from Sandy. And that money, had strings attached to it because it's federal appropriation. So we need to award the contract. We've engaged with the elected officials in terms of what the nature of that work is and why. Because the first thing people ask is, do you really need to do this? Do you really need to do that level of effort? We need to convince them of that. And so far we've been able to do that. And then interact with the elected officials, their constituents who are our customers, what's the best way to be able to do that work, trying to minimize the impact. You got a number of different parties to serve. The commuters who commute either to Brooklyn from Manhattan or vice versa, the business owners who are interested in people being able to use the system to get to their businesses, and then with some kind of rationality have this discussion and try to build a consensus for this is the plan, and then communicate that to the public. And that's where we're at. By far, the most impactful of anything we've ever done in my time here. But there was a period of time the Williamsburg Bridge was closed for a period of time. We had like 10 years of being partially off the Manhattan Bridge. So it's not like nothing like this has been done. But in terms of the magnitude of this, by far, it's the largest in terms of customers touched.
Hi, good morning. If you'll indulge me, I just had a quick question on the $400 million with this real estate issue that came up. I just wanted to know if it was $400 million flat, or is it something you can bond against for more money?
I think the money's fungible, and I think it could be either $400 million straight, or we could bond against it, but I'm looking for Bob. Come up here.
This is capital money that's in the 10 to 14 capital program. This is money that we are projecting for the 15 to 19 capital program. This is also money that's to reimburse us for funds that we spent relocating down here and relocating as we consolidated. So in total, it's about $430 million. We could bond against that. We could generate bond proceeds to fund that with revenues that would come from a ground rent and other revenues. So at this point in time, we do need that money. It is an important part of our capital program. So, okay.
What's the split between the existing capital program and the estimated?
250, 110.
250 for this?
For the 10 to 14.
And if a question on Second Avenue Subway real quick, just so I can, wanted to get your comments on the independent engineer. He said, the accelerated schedule, it's good, but, and I'm paraphrasing, there's still a moderate risk despite the accelerated program. So I wanted to get your comments on, what he believes in terms of risking the December 2016 goal, and wanted to also hear from you about the fact that this did not. He raised issues about the design and the scope changes. He said his top concern was changes in scope and design during the construction process. So I wanted to see, your thoughts on his concern and the risk of.
I'm not going to comment on what his opinion was in his head, because I just don't do that. But the gist of what he was saying is one of the role of the independent engineer who works for the board is to take a look at these high-level capital projects and opine to the board, flag for the board concerns they may have, so that we can have a dialogue with respect to just not hearing from the project management staff. So from a standpoint of, as you complete major construction projects, especially a tunnel, you got the physical construction of the tunnel, you got the physical construction of the stations, but probably one of the most complex is what we call the systems work. So that's the tracks, signals, communication, ventilation, fire and life safety, things of that nature that have to come near the tail end of the construction as you're approaching the opening date of that system, of that element of the system. And so there's a lot of interaction with people. There's what we call formal phases of testing and commissioning that equipment, making sure that it's certifiable and it can go into service. And it requires a tremendous amount of work of a lot of resources. And so he was flagging for us the concerns based on other projects like 7 West, when we went to Hudson Yards, of those issues. We're confident that we've got a better approach to that now with dedicated resources. The president of New York City Transit's met with the president of MTA, and they've dedicated resources to do that. And I think his other comment is that if you're going to continually make changes to the contractors who are finishing up this work, it adds risk in terms of getting it done on time. So in summary, that's where his stated concerns were. And we appreciated them, but we're still confident we're going to get this done on time.
I have a question for Tom, but one quick, tiny follow-up for Bob. How much in bond proceeds could that $400 million produce and generate for either capital plan?
$430 is primarily going to be bond proceeds. There's revenues that we're going to receive from the developer over a number of years, and so we would bond against those future revenues. But some of the revenue dollars would come to us directly, and we would use those as pay-as-you-go.
Okay, so the total value is $430 million towards the other capital plan
after bond financing. Thanks. Tom, the state is the governor's proposing a design and construction corporation as part of the dormitory authority that would oversee capital projects, potentially worth more than $50 million. What are your thoughts on this proposal? How do you think it would work? What concerns, if
I'm
any,
not
do you
going to
have at
comment
some
on the
point?
proposal because I haven't had a detailed look at it. It's a piece of legislation that's pending. What I do know is the governor, as our other stakeholders, are concerned about our delivery of projects that are very large in magnitude, big in scope, large in magnitude of dollars and big in scope. I think an argument could be made that we could do better at those, and we haven't done well on some of them. And so his concern is, because he was part of the dialogue to get $8.3 billion for the $26 billion capital program, is faster, better, and more economically delivered. And so under that heading, he's saying, maybe we need to have some other party take a look at this. And there's a dialogue going on, but I'm not going to comment on the specifics because I haven't had a chance to take a look at it.
Well, generally speaking, do you think the MTA manages procurements and capital projects sufficiently? And do you think CPOC's oversight of capital projects is enough? Or do you think the MTA could benefit from oversight from outside agency?
It's hard to give a simple answer that covers the size of a program that's $26 billion. If you take a look at the projects that are relatively straightforward and small in scope, I think we do a very good job and we've continually improved upon it. On the very large, what we call mega projects, there is plenty of room for improvement, and I think that's what the governor's saying. We have to approach and address that plenty of room for improvement.
Hey, while we're on the governor, more than 35 state legislators sent a letter to him this week saying, complaining that there was not any new money in his executive budget. Last month, you weren't here, but Freddie Ferrer said that you basically trusted the word of the governor. Do you want to see money in the executive budget for this year and the coming years?
Well, there is an executive budget that was printed, that was delivered at the state of the state, and includes the summary that you talk about. We're right in the middle of a, not exact middle, but we're right in a legislative process. And what you're seeing is actions taken by some of the legislators saying they want more specificity. I've been pretty clear since coming back. One of the reasons I came back is the money is here for the capital programs and operating budgets we need, on good times, on bad times. I've also been clear that the legislature has come to the table and decided how we get that money, and I'm confident they will. It's very, very important, though, when you have the leader of the city and the leader of the state saying they're committing, 8.3 and 2.5 billion, because that's where the process starts. So yes, I am. But the proof will be in the pudding, and in my definition of the pudding is when we have an approved capital program review board approved plan.
See a greater level of specificity in the budget as part of these ongoing negotiations?
Over the years, I've seen varying levels of specificity, but when it came time to pay the bills and have the money to have it, we've had it. So that's the best way for me to answer the question. The legislative process and the responsibilities they have to identify funding sources and funding the needs of transportation, health, education, across a broad spectrum, I respect that responsibility and I defer to them to do it. So if we're assured we're getting the money we need, that meets my standard and the board's.
The other day, the Transit Committee voted on creating a committee for keeping recidivists out of the system. How easy do you think it's going to be, from a legal perspective, to just arrest someone on site, and do you think that there will be any legal challenges to that?
My understanding is that was not what the nature of the discussion was. I wasn't at that committee, but I was at Finance when the issue came up again. And what one of the board members recommended, and it actually was in the thought of a number of board members' minds, the city, there has been an on and off discussion with the city over 10 years as to whether or not there should be some form of recidivist program such that if criminals, convicted criminals, reach a certain criteria, a number of crimes committed in the subway, a certain number of times they're banned from the subway. There'll be a whole host of challenges to that legally. However, on an individual basis, there are times that a judge, in rendering a sentence to an individual, prohibits that individual from certain types of behaviors. Not driving a car, can't go into certain locations, have to stay away from schools, any one of those. That's what this initiative is aimed at. So we devote some resources that are tracking high-profile cases where repeat offenders for crimes committed in the subway or in the system at large are tracked, and then we give that information to the district attorneys, and they present that information to the judge at the time of sentence execution or rendering the sentence. And that's what the nature of this particular initiative is. Thank you very much.